We've had some incredible, like here's already these tithing testimonies are coming. Took the tithing challenge, wrote first check on Sunday, came into work Monday. They gave me an unexpected bonus. It was more than the tithe. Holla back, y'all. Some of you are like, why didn't that happen to me? Well, just continue to be faithful for 7 weeks, and let's see what your testimony is by the end of that 7 weeks. Here's another tithing challenge. Was a Christian for 30 years, but never gave my tithe to God. Took tithing challenge. Says the very first Sunday, he gave his tithe check. An old friend that he did not speak to, when evidently they met up and he gave him, what is this? An envelope full of money. You know, we got some mobsters here at Celebration Church. I just... He says, it made up for what the tithe was and then some. Great things going on. We've tons of testimonies from the marriage seminar weekend as well. Tons of great things. Let me tell you about a few other things going on here at the church. This past week, a great guy, one of our long-standing guest service members, been serving in the church for 7 years. Committed suicide and shot himself and took his life last week. Very difficult time for his family and friends. Tell you about another couple that I know, great family here in our church who's been here from forever, Brad and Kristen Vickers. Young couple. Lots of kids. In fact, they just had another baby, their 6th child. A few months ago, Brad was diagnosed with liver cancer. The doctor told him he had 6 months to live. 6 months to live. There's another young man in our church who I happened to meet, and he told me his story of how he witnessed his wife murder their 4-year-old baby boy twins. You might have seen there's a show like Dateline or 2020, whatever. He was one of those stories, how his wife murdered his twin sons, 4 years old. You know, I know that many of you in here today and attending or watching Celebration Church, you know, your trial might not be that severe, but you're going through your own season of pain. You have some real difficulties in your life. Some of you are in here today and you don't see how you're going to be able to get through the season that you're in. And as a pastor, it's interesting how it seems like in some of the greatest seasons of blessing and joy and all this kind of great stuff, at the same time, there's people going through incredible pain and incredible trials and experiencing tragedy. And it's that tension. It's like, how do you balance that tension? And I think about Jesus, who the Bible says that Jesus, he was anointed with the oil of gladness above his fellows. In other words, Jesus was the most joyful minister that there had ever been. Yet at the same time, the Bible says that Jesus was a man of sorrows and acquainted with our grief. In other words, Jesus, he was joyful. He celebrated the goodness of God and eternity, and he's raising people from the dead, and he's healing blind eyes, and people are responding to the gospel, and lives are being turned around, and he's rejoicing in all that, and he has great joy in all that, but at the same time, he's seeing the pain and the challenges and the lostness of humanity and how sin has taken its toll on this world. And that's why Jesus, he was anointed with gladness. He was full of joy, but at the same time, he was a man of sorrows. That's what true compassion is, when you can identify with the pain of another person, where you can experience it to a degree where it's almost happening to yourself. Aren't you glad that we serve a God who's been touched with our infirmities, and He knows what we are going through, and He knows how to minister to us? Come on, can you give Jesus a hand for that? So real quickly, let me just kind of go back to Psalm 84. For you, I'm going to read it, a couple of verses out of there in just a second. But I want to say is this tension, this is a lot what the people of God in Nehemiah chapter 9 are experiencing. This is why they're doing this rededication, because they're like, man, this is awesome. Jerusalem's all new and everything. The city's looking great, but like, man, Nehemiah, I know you understand what we've all been through. I know you understand the pain that I've been going through. I know you understand, these patterns, and that's why you read Nehemiah, there's all these genealogies, like they're trying to see who's left, because so many of their loved ones and family members have been killed or lost, or they'll never see them again. They've seen this before where the people of God have kind of come into a new season, and too many times only to fall back into old patterns, and unfortunately that cycle of pain repeats itself. So they're like, look, man, Nehemiah, this is great. We're going into this new season for Jerusalem. We want to make sure it's a new season for us. We want to get through some of these cycles. We want to come through this and get into a new season for us where we can experience a new season, where we can have freshness in our lives, where we can go to the next level in the purposes of God. Jerusalem's been healed. We want to get healed. And I believe that's the cry of many of you today. And I want you to look back here. What God says, the theme psalm for our series here, Psalm 84. Look at verse 5. Let me reread just a few of these. What joy for those whose strength comes from the Lord, who have set their minds on a pilgrimage. Everybody say pilgrimage. Pilgrimage to Jerusalem. I want to remind you that you are on a pilgrimage. And what this verse is saying here, those who have made the Lord their strength, for those of you, you have decided to truly put God first in your life. And even though right now you are on this pilgrimage on this earth, I promise you, because you have decided to put God first in your life, you will experience the most joy that you could possibly experience in this many times dreadful, painful world. But you've got to understand that putting God first and keeping God first, that's why we call ourselves a God-first church. Putting God first and keeping God first, that's how to have sustainable joy in your life, regardless of the different seasons that you go through. And there will be some tough ones. That's why the next verse says this. It says, look, when they walk through the valley of weeping, some of your translations might say the valley of Baca. That word Baca there means weeping. When they walk through the valley of weeping, it will become a place of refreshing springs. The autumn rains will clothe it with blessings. It says you're going to walk through this valley of weeping, but because you have God first, because you're faithful to God, you're not going to stay in it. You're going to walk through it. See, and it's going to end up being a place of refreshment. And then it goes on to say, look at this. Here's God's plan for your trial. They will continue to, verse 7, they will continue to grow stronger, and each of them will appear before God in Jerusalem. In other words, it's God's purpose and plan that the pain you are going through right now will eventually become a place of strength for you, so that you can actually be a refreshment. It will become refreshing springs, a refreshment for others that are going through their painful trials of life. So that's why I love this. It says, look, you're putting God first. God's your strength. He's going to give you joy. The joy of the Lord is your, guess where that verse comes from? Nehemiah chapter 8. The joy of the Lord is your strength. So here's the deal. As you are on this pilgrimage on earth, and as you're headed home, I'm talking to your true home, your eternal home. Your mind, you're driven by eternity. You're living for a greater reward. Understand this, as we go to the building at Bay Meadows and 9A, that is going to be an awesome home, but guess what? You're still just passing through. It's not your permanent home. That's just a little foreshadowing taste